an offense takes a look at your defense early in the season, what do you think? What do you want them to see? What's going to be the identity of your defense?
I want them to see that we're still the standard of what we've always been, an attacking defense that plays fast, we play violent, we play with speed, and we finish.
Well, that ain't happening. The San Francisco 49ers suffered the most embarrassing loss of the 2024 season, and one, frankly, that I can remember in a long time, with the defense being the most glaring issue in both back-to-back weekly losses. So the question has to be asked, is the 49ers' first-time defensive coordinator, Nick Sorensen, the right guy for the job? Well, that's what we're going to talk about. So with that being said, let's get into it, y'all. Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy, Ryan Tigey, back in action. The San Francisco 49ers defense has been abysmal thus far in the 2024 season, whereas the 49er offense ranks in the top 3 in almost every statistical category. And not to mention, their last 2 games, the 49ers offense has been dominating opposing offenses in time of possession, total plays, first downs, and passing yards. Yet, they still lose. I should be on here celebrating an unbelievable performance by Jauan Jennings and Brock Purdy this past Sunday going against the Rams, but we're having to talk about the defense. The defense not doing their part. The San Francisco 49er defense has not been ready to play. That officially puts the eyes on Nick Sorensen and not having his unit ready, and a coach who, frankly, hasn't been doing a good enough job. And even more concerning, as the San Francisco 49ers have battled an array of injuries on the offensive side of the ball, the 49ers defense has yet to still get it together, even when they know the 49ers are without their top skill players on offense, yet have been unable to pick up the slack. Last year, the 49ers defense was widely discussed about it being a down year relative to previous years under Steve Wilks. Well, it's gotten worse in the 2024 season, and although it's still early, it's been clear as day. The defense is not the same. And you have to remember, leading up to the season, as Nick Sorensen, prior to him getting hired as a defensive coordinator, he was not Kyle Shanahan's first choice. If you remember, Kyle Shanahan reached out to Bill Belichick and also inquired about 2 currently employed defensive coordinators, Jeff Ulbrich of the New York Jets and the reigning Super Bowl Kansas City Chiefs defensive coordinator, Steve Spagnuolo. And after Steve Wilks got fired, there were a few main talking points. Steve Wilks, he was an outsider, which was already a risk coming into the job, but that he had a different style of defense. And in fact, Shanahan mentioned scheme fit and scheme philosophy were some of the reason that Steve Wilks, as a defensive coordinator, did not work out. And the reason they gave Nick Sorensen a chance as a first-time defensive coordinator, it was an internal hire. He had been with the team for a few years. He knew the defense. And the whole goal was to get back to similar form that they had with Robert Saleh as the defensive coordinator and DeMeco Ryans. It's a more straightforward defense that favors more on the pass rush and simplifies the back end. Well, through both losses, the defense cannot get off the field. In both games, the Vikings and the Rams were without their top wide receivers. They were playing backups, which has been an utter embarrassment. So for those that like stats out there, and I know, well aware, stats do not tell the whole story, but they do confirm what you've been seeing through the eye test. And what my eyes are telling me reads true about these stats. Currently, the San Francisco 49ers rank 30th out of 32 teams in third down conversions. They also rank 30th in yards per play with 6.1. 1 year ago, as I already mentioned, that was considered a down year. They ranked 8th with 5.1 yards per play given up, which says a lot. The 49ers have never been this bad on average yards per play given up by an opposing offense. And then to top it off, they're 20th ranked in passing yards allowed. It's been pretty clear thus far, the defense, they can't cover. Against the Rams, they gave up 13 points in the fourth quarter. And it'd be one thing if it was Stafford and Puca Kupp and Puca Kupp coming back and winning the game, but it wasn't. The 49ers surrendered 10 points to Stafford, Tutu Atwell, and a bunch of no-name backups on the Los Angeles Rams. And it was pretty clear leading up to the game, or at least in the beginning of the game, the Rams offense, you could tell they hadn't played with each other a whole heck of a lot. Why? Because Stafford didn't complete a single pass until the midpoint of the second quarter. So the fact that they were able to collectively get it together and ultimately win the game, oftentimes getting burned deep in pass coverage, it shows what kind of dire situation the 49ers defense, specifically on the coverage side, they're currently in. And then we talk about secondary issues. One thing after rewatching the Rams game, it appeared Nick Sorensen oftentimes seemed to be guessing on what he was going to call. If man coverage didn't work, he would call a zone coverage. But when they were in man coverage, they are not good enough on the linebacker level and the secondary level to cover opposing receivers when they're in man one-on-one coverage. And the most obvious is they can't cover verticals. Jair Brown and Hufanga are very similar safeties. They both run downhill, hard-hitting, able to come up, make a tackle, fill a hole, but they're also on the slower side. And both of them have been susceptible to getting burned deep, and specifically Jair Brown not playing his keys and getting out of position to ultimately give up a big passing play. And then one thing's for sure, speedy wide receivers can dominate the 49ers DBs. The best corner, Mooney Ward, he does better with bigger, more physical receivers. Isaac Yiadom, he is being targeted. The Rams went after him 5 times and got 5 completions. And that doesn't even mention the PIs the 49ers gave up, 111 yards in penalties, most coming from the defensive side of the ball on deep shots that Stafford would just chuck up in the air, ultimately knowing his receiver's either going to be open and come down with it, or they were going to get the PI. And the question is, where's Brandon Staley? Isn't he the DB guru and part of the compliment he was going to be able to offer? Or did he just bring his coaching curse that he had with him with the Los Angeles Chargers into the 49ers building? And then when you just talk about additional coverage plays, Devondre Campbell, linebacker filling in for Dre Greenlaw, he's a liability. In fact, he had a perfect passer rating for Stafford, 3 targets for 3 completions and 1 massive PI call. The 49ers went into this game with essentially all their players healthy, and they got embarrassed by a bunch of no-names players with the Rams team that hadn't played with each other and in reality, suck balls. So I think it's been pretty obvious the past 2 weeks that there's a recipe to beat the 49ers. A quarterback with a big arm and a fast wide receiver. And probably the most frustrating thing is that they kept getting beat by the same 2 plays. They'd run a bunch formation with a choice water route combo. The other, a deep in paired with a rail route. And the fact that they kept getting beat on those identical same 2 plays, that's on Nick Sorensen for not making adjustments and not making sure his defense is in the best position to stop those plays, because the Rams ran those 2 plays over and over and over again. And now we pivot to the defensive line. The defensive line, they have not been getting home. They were going against a backup offensive line and still yet were to really put any pressure, let alone get sacks on Matt Stafford. The 49ers, their historical defensive scheme, rush 4. Well, in prior years, that has worked. This year, so far, it has not worked. They could not contain the edge. They had no gap integrity. The wide 9 alignment that the defensive front lines up in, the whole point is so that the running back can't get the edge on a running play. And then on a passing play, since the defensive ends are lined up outside the tackles, it gives them more of a clear path to the quarterback, ultimately making the quarterback step up in the pocket, hopefully a muddy pocket, and make quick rush decisions. But that ain't happening. And so when you think about the lack of pressure from the D-line, well, the coverage is going to break down in the back end, and the 49ers are going to be fucked time and time again if they're not able to get pressure. When we talk about pressure, Matt Stafford only had 5 total pressures that entire game. He had all day to throw. He was making coffee back there in no rush and then chucking the ball deep. The coverage would break down. Someone would have a misassignment, and yet they would get a 40-yard gain on a penalty or a catch. And you think about all that fucking money the 49ers have put into that defensive line, just the defense in general. A lot of all-pros and Pro Bowlers on there, and yet they can't get the job done. And one thing that a player I've been thinking about who hasn't been making an impact as much as they should be, Nick Bosa. One thing I noticed about other superstar pass rushers like a TJ Watt, it seems like TJ Watt is always disrupting the opposing offense. And they don't have that different of numbers through 3 games thus far. But TJ Watt seems to have such a much more bigger presence for the defense of the Steelers versus what Nick does for the 49ers at this moment. There was multiple times in that game Nick Bosa was lined up one-on-one, which he doesn't get that often, one-on-one with a backup offensive tackle for the Rams, and wasn't able to get home. He got stopped. And now, to add insult and injury, as we all heard, Hargrave, torn tricep, out for the year, probably the last game he'll ever play as a 49er. because next year his money goes up to $19 million. He's not worth $19 million. So the 49ers, they got to make a move before the trade deadline approaching in October to go get somebody. And I believe they will. Hopefully it'll be like a player like DJ Reed from the Broncos, but time will tell. But the guys currently that are on the roster on the defensive line need to step up, and Chris Kasarik needs to start putting the pressure on the defensive line, while Nick Sorensen needs to call the correct plays and understand what the offense is doing. A lot of people talked about how the Rams were running 11 personnel, 1 running back, 1 tight end, 3 receivers. This game, they ran a lot of 12 personnel, which they do not do. That was because they had all of their star receivers out. And it appeared that Nick Sorensen was not anticipating that at all. The defense was not anticipating that at all. And ultimately, the 49ers got the ball shoved down their throat and beaten by a team there was without any question that is inferior to the 49ers. So I will say, with all that being said, there is one glimmer of hope. As we all know, there was a lot of turnover, specifically on the defensive line this past offseason. And it does take some time to build chemistry and to get things right and get the defensive motor running. Because right now, they're not playing with much confidence. The DBs seem to be getting nervous when the ball gets thrown deep, and they just have not yet settled in. And so that is something I still expect that they should be able to do, but it's not looking good through the first 3 weeks, specifically the last 2 games. And then to wrap things up, just on a different note outside of the defense, which has been atrocious, in my opinion, when you look at the game against the Rams, Ronnie Bell, he should be cut. He shouldn't be on the field. Cowing should be on the field, but he's not, because Kyle Shanahan is very stubborn and has another doghouse situation, what it appears like, with Cowing, saying he's still not ready. In fact, here's what Kyle Shanahan had to say when got asked the question about why Cowing wasn't on the field and Ronnie Bell was, who ultimately ended up dropping a pass, which is just the cherry on top and partially the reason why the 49ers lost the game. Let's take a listen.
Like, okay, let's get a younger player into the game, and then why didn't it happen?
Because it wasn't the plan. If there would have been an injury, he would have, but he wasn't ready to do that yet, and so we kept him at punt returner. But you have 5 guys up, so if someone did get hurt, he had to be ready, and then he would have got those reps.
Is he getting close to being ready for that?
We'll see this week. Nothing's happened here in the last few days. We got practice today, and we'll see how he does. I hope so.
Pretty typical of a vague answer. Brandon Ayuk has still relatively been pedestrian. He has 119 yards on 11 receptions in the past 3 games. That's averaging 39 yards per game. Fun math, I did his new contract, which he was very loud about getting paid on average $30 million a year. With 11 receptions, each reception Brandon Ayuk has had thus far this season is worth about $436,000, give or take. My math could be off, but that just shows how pedestrian and no presence Brandon Ayuk has been felt on the field, especially this last game when he was needed the most. And for a 49ers offense that has literally built their reputation off yak, yards after catch, well, the 49ers offense, they're currently dead last in the NFL. So even when the receivers do catch a pass, they're not making a play, which is what they've historically been elite at. So that is something that's just a cause for concern and something I do believe should get better as the season goes along. And then special teams is an absolute joke. I understand Kyle's philosophy of just don't do anything negative to hurt the 49ers. Well, Brian Schneider, I don't know what he's doing. Jake Moody, he's always good for one missed kick in a crucial moment. We saw it last year in Cleveland. He did it again, 55 yards in a dome. He should hit that. And the special teams just gives me Hightower vibes. For those that remember the previous special teams coordinator, Hightower, that's what this feels like. So, all right, y'all, I just had to get on here, vent a little bit about what I'm seeing with the defense. Is Nick Sorensen the right guy for the job? Let me know what you think in the comments. And now, as we approach week 4, it becomes a must win. The 49ers are going up against the worst offense in the Patriots in the entire NFL in terms of passing yards and points per game. So this has to be the get right game. It has to. So I'll be back, but until my next video, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. You know the deal. Hit me up. Peace.